Hello, welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight for tonight's episode of The Traverse, the Rights and Democracy Institute's monthly conversation series, where we explore the ideas and issues that make up our movement as we talk with people who are putting them into action. And I'm Mia Schultz, the Catalyst Leadership Coordinator for Rights and Democracy Institute. Today, as we close out the first quarter of 2021, activists, legislators, and organizations across the country are marking it with a day of action and advocacy for the Thrive Agenda. Federal legislation, this is federal legislation that was introduced earlier this year, which takes a holistic approach to addressing the interlocking crisis of racial injustice, the coronavirus pandemic, economic inequality, and the climate crisis. Thrive is an acronym that stands for transform, heal, and renew by investing in a vibrant economy. And it is built on 8 pillars that cover everything from creating millions of unionized jobs to ecological restoration to revitalization of public institutions. One key pillar interwoven throughout the agenda is investment in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities that have historically been oppressed, excluded from decision-making spaces, and harmed by extractive and exploitative policies. We are joined this evening by 2 guests who are bringing this future-facing work to life at a state level. 2 bold pieces of legislation have been introduced in the Vermont legislature this session that are really digging into how we begin to dismantle oppressive systems and create a healthy and equitable future for all. I would like to welcome Steffen Gillom, president of the Windham County NAACP, who is instrumental in developing the BIPOC-led Land Access and Opportunity Act. Thank you for being with us tonight, Steffen.
Yes, hi, Mia. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And also with us tonight is Vermont's State Representative Brian Cina, who introduced the BIPOC Land Access Act, as well as a regenerative economy bill. Brian, thank you for coming.
Thank you, and hello, Mia. And it is great to see you through a computer, although I look forward to the day when I can look into your eyes in the real world again.
Agree. I look forward to that day too, Brian. Thank you. So let's get started. Can someone give us a snapshot of each bill? Steffen, can you give me a quick introduction to the BIPOC Land Access Bill?
Yes, so I'm happy to. I don't know if everyone can see me. I'm not popping up on the screen. Can y'all see me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, that's good. I don't know what's going on mine. So anyway, the BIPOC Land Access Bill is pretty much a bill that is hoping, and we are hoping, will allow for equitable access to land and home ownership, stewardship, through multiple different modalities, such as trust or flat out home or land ownership. We're asking for a certain amount of money to be pulled by the government and a board to be created to establish and to create some sort of a vetting process for folks of color who want to apply and who want to be part of this movement and part of this bill.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a much needed bill. It's a much needed thing that we need in the state of Vermont, and I think Vermont can lead the way. It's exciting. Brian, can you tell us about the regenerative economy bill, other than the fact that it's hard to pronounce?
Be careful what you ask for, because you will get it. Because I can talk for a long time about bills, but in all seriousness, I will try to try to not get too carried away with the details. So the Regenerative Economy Bill, what it does is it says that the state of Vermont intends to create a regenerative economy, and that we intend to transition, to have a just transition from our current economic system, which is built on relationships defined by extraction of resources from the earth and exploitation of the labor of people and animals even, and transitioning from that system we're currently in to a new economy that's rooted in regenerative practices, in practices that care for the earth, that don't just take but nurture the earth, and that take care of other people. That we create an economy where human potential is cultivated and where all people can thrive. So the way we propose to do that in the Regenerative Economy Bill is through people's assemblies, because the idea is it's not just about how the money flows, it's how the power flows. And this is also a theme in our Ceding Power Vermont bill, the land access bill. We can come back to that. But it's, when we look at transforming our way of life on Earth, we need to look at not only where the resources are going, but who's making decisions, and who's impacted by decisions, and who are we centering in our decisions. So what the Regenerative Economy Bill does is it says that it's the intent of the state of Vermont to take, I believe it's 30 years. I'd actually have to check to make sure it's not 20 years. Sorry, I know there's a big difference. It's been a while since I've read it, but I believe it's 2045, so it's less than 30 years, that we would like to transition to a regenerative economy. And the way we would do this is there's 11 regions of the state that are connected to regional planning commissions. And so what we would do is have the regional planning commissions serve as sort of the staff for a people's assembly in each region of the state. And they would work to organize a people's assembly where we bring people together through a combination of in-person and technological access. Now with since the pandemic, it really showed us that there's new ways people can participate. So looking at sort of a fusion approach to bring people together in regions to look at their regions and create a regenerative economy plan for their region. And these plans would include all facets of life. It would look at racial and social equity, and looking at the impact of systemic racism in the region. It would look at the strengths of the economy and like what's working and what are the natural and human resources already in those regions, like what are the strengths, but then looking at what are the gaps, what are the areas where we might want to promote something new to fill in a gap. And part of that is creating circular economies. So the idea is like in circular economy, the products of one process, the waste gets used in something else and the product moves on to some other place and gets used. So for example, small town in Vermont that's struggling, but they have logging operations nearby and they have a furniture maker. Perhaps they create a wood burning plant. Perhaps they create a toy making facility. Perhaps they, look at what other businesses and activities could be promoted in a region to make the regions have more opportunities for people and more jobs. So there's so many examples because the bill looks at the economy, it looks at education, it looks at healthcare and public health, it looks at social and racial equity, it looks at environmental justice, and it really asks people in a region to come together and do an assessment and make a plan. And then after those initial plans are made, the bill proposes that a regional a regenerative council, a regenerative economy council is convened on a state level to look at integrating all of those plans into a statewide roadmap so that the state can invest money in these decisions made on the local level to build the economy on the local level towards one that's regenerative. So I could go on and on about it. I think that gives people the gist of it. There's some other details in the bill, but I think that's the overall idea of the bill is to create a new form of democracy that allows people to transform our economy.
That's beautiful. That seems really comprehensive and inclusive. And I'm just wondering, Brian, what informed or influenced this bill? How did you get here with this bill?
The Regenerative Economy Bill one night I was in my yard and I saw somebody in the bushes, and it was myself coming back from the future. And I said to myself, if you don't do this now, all will be lost. No, I'm kidding. That's not what happened. I like to think sometimes that that ideas would be generated like through these sci-fi-esque ways. But and for those watching, it's been a long day in front of the computer, and humor is a way for us all to cope with the stress we're under right now. So I'll tell you the truth though about the bill. That when I was first elected to the legislature in 2017 was when I started. I looked at all the different things I was concerned about that was in my platform, and I was trying to kind of create bills or work with people on different pieces. And one of the things was, looking at the economy and looking at how our capitalist economy is extractive. It's been designed, especially in this country, it's been designed on land that was stolen, on the backs of enslaved people and immigrants working in factories and migrant workers. The whole economy was built in injustice, and that is part of that process. Like our relationship to each other and our relationship to the earth is dysfunctional, and we treat people like they're disposable. We throw people away. And I say we as a society. I try not to do that personally, but I'll own my part in the greater society that we live in, because none of us are innocent. We're all complicit in some way. And seeing that, I thought, well, the issue with carbon emissions and global warming was like a hot issue, but I feel like people weren't seeing the bigger picture. They were so focused on carbon emissions, and then there's all this like business and money around that. So like the extractive economy plays itself out again. It's like, oh, we're gonna feel good about ourselves driving around an electric car that we mined the rare earth metals out of indigenous land in South America and left a mess. And then when that car dies, like, where do we put that car? What do we do with it? So I created a bill called the Zero Waste Economy Bill. And that's where this all started in 2017 with the Zero Waste Economy Bill. And the idea was that the state was going to do a study about how to become a zero waste economy. And then some of my colleagues said, oh, that's the wrong approach. And they had this like more capitalist approach. They're like, you need to have an RFP and put a bid out and let a company do it. So I was like, okay, cool, let's try that idea. So we tried that idea, nothing happened with it. At that point, I was like, I want to go back in the other direction, back towards like the people figuring it out. And so I did a little research, and I discovered the Climate Justice Alliance, I believe is the name of the organization. I'm going to Google it so that I feel bad because I'm tired, and then I don't want to like say the wrong thing. Yes, it's Climate Justice Alliance. It's still in the history of my search bar. It popped right up. So I someone along the way directed me to the Climate Justice Alliance, and I looked it up, and it sounded like BIPOC influence, and it had this like consciousness around like that seemed rooted in our, and all of us, if you go back far enough, are indigenous. All of us, our ancestors were connected to land, and we've been severed from that and moved around, et cetera. And we have reconnection with the land. But these values were grounded in sort of indigenous values around respect for the cycles of life and for the earth and for our connection to the earth and nature. And I went through the principles of the Climate Justice Alliance and turned that into a legislative intent section for the bill, and then decided to follow their lead and call for people's assemblies to make the change. It's not the state, and it's not a company. Like, the people will do it. We'll invest in, and we're going to pay people, and we're going to give childcare and food for them to come out and do this. And, to whatever degree they can. And, this is a very daring, bold idea, but that's really the story of it. Is it started out with the Zero Waste Economy Bill, and then realizing that we could go further, and it isn't just about a zero waste economy, it's about the regenerative economy. And I got that language also from the Climate Justice Alliance. So I give you credit, Climate Justice Alliance. And that's sort of the story of how that bill came to be. And just one other thing I'll say is, as this idea has moved along because this is the 5th year. In the beginning, there wasn't a lot of support. Little by little, people come on board. Like the solid waste districts became interested. The regional planning commissions are interested in the idea. Vermont Gas is interested in the idea. You'd be surprised at all these different people who, when they hear about it, they say, you know what? This is what we need to do. Because we keep trying to fix things like in isolation, because that's the Western mindset. It's like, compartmentalize things and like don't look at how it's all related and in the big picture, that we actually should take a step back and reevaluate the big picture. And then if we can make fine-tune adjustments here and there and slowly move things to a different way. And if we do it through the people's assemblies, like we really are changing the way that power flows in a country that was formed to really concentrate the power in the hands of the few, not the many. So
Thank you for that, Brian. It's true. It truly is a people's movement that we need. Yeah, it's time for a change. And speaking of, Steffen, I'd love to bring you into the conversation and talk a little bit more about the BIPOC land access. There's a well-documented history of discrimination against Black and Brown farmers and housing practices throughout the country. Can you talk a little bit about that history of land ownership, farming, and race in Vermont?
Yeah, I mean, well, we can go all the way back into, and I can't remember the name of the person specifically, but to our first Black lawmaker and how they came about. We can go back to the eugenics movements and land discrimination around that. We can go back eons and look at land discrimination in Vermont. And Brian, also jump in and help me here if you want to, but I can also say that when it comes to land discrimination in Vermont, one of the biggest problems is that not only do we have people who have an access to land, but we have a lot of people of color in Vermont who are stewarding land, but they don't really have any ways to own it, or to, if not own it, at least have it in trust, right? And if we look at, I think it was I have to start looking at facts myself, like Brian, let me go to Google, but I think it was the Northeast Farmers of Color, or maybe it was the Farmland Trust that showed that there were, I think, 8 farms in Vermont.
8 farms are
8 farms in Vermont that were for people of color. I don't think it's much better as far as the New England region goes either. American Farmland Trust, thank you. So when we look at the history of that, we can see that there really has been no history of Black land ownership or stewardship in Vermont, or brown, or anything else. And so I think that it's kind of a non-starter sometimes. And when I'm asked that question, sometimes I don't want to say I challenge it, but I say we have to look at it differently, because there really is no history. I mean, what we're doing here is creating a history, and we're trying to create legacy. And I think that's kind of what this bill is all about, honestly.
Absolutely. I'll give you a little bit of stats. We have, despite comprising almost 18% of Burlington's population, the state's largest city, we know, people of color only own 4% of homes there. Yet are 4 times more likely to be denied a loan than white people. So can you tell us about the land access opportunity, BIPOC land access and opportunity bill, and how that addresses those disparities and the systemic racism that we see historically and presently?
Yes. So first and foremost, it creates an opportunity act or fund, or to and a board to empower and budget as money as needed to applicants for down payments or things like sliding scales for homes or farms, right? We work to expand financial education and resource management for folks. So when you actually get land, or you're actually able to access a home, you're not just kind of left out to dry, right? Which I think is important to mention, because that's usually what happens in a lot of these programs. There's not a lot of holistic, what I would call holistic building around it, right? So what we really try to do is build like a universe or an ecosystem that actually allows for that, right? So we explore mortgage assistance and tax benefits. We're collaborating with different farmers collaboratives, like the American Farmland Trust, who's actually been really helpful. Our representatives from there have been really helpful, or the Northeast Farmers of Color, NAACP. We're going to institute a BIPOC-led Every Town committee that is made up of representatives from NAACP, but also that's going to work in collaboration with that board. So that board is made up of representatives from everywhere, and I can read it off if you want me to. But it's going to be from the top to the bottom. The NAACP is going to be involved. There's going to be State House involvement. There's going to be hopefully Abenaki involvement, right? So it's going to be a collaborative and holistic board, and hopefully we're also going to have some sort of collaboration with anti-racist mutual aid fund networks as well.
Beautiful.
I mean, there is a smorgasbord. I could go on and on about all the things that the bill actually does. And one thing that I would tell people to do is to read. It's extensive. And I know we're in the times of not wanting to read all of that, right? Zoom land is killing us. But this is the thing. There is a very comprehensive finding section in the front of the bill that I think really lays out a history that is too extensive and honestly beyond my scope. I mean, it is really extensive and hard to capture, but I think it does a really good job at laying it out in a way that explains exactly why we need to have land access now, an opportunity now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Steffen. You know, thinking about these two bills, either one of you can chime in. What do you see as the point of intersection with them? How do they intersect?
Maybe I'll start off and then I'll give Steffen a moment, and then hand it back over to you. So, you know, I see some interconnections between these bills around how they change the way that the government distributes power. Because in the land access bill, you know, it started out with Steffen coming to me. We had met in the State House, you know, working on just interacting on other issues, and became friends, and decided, you know, Steffen thought it would be important to do some work around property ownership for BIPOC, and also that it was important that as queer, male-bodied, even though I'm gender non-binary for the record, I am male-bodied and perceived as male most of the time, but like as queer males who are BIPOC, how we get overlooked and ignored a lot, and how we wanted to just do something together that we thought would help everyone, not just us. You know, so we talked about this idea of BIPOC property ownership, and then we met Kenya, and you know, the story was made and it led to this bill. But in these discussions, one theme that emerged as we worked together is we kept looking at all the systems that exist that already work with people to help them with property ownership or wealth management or land access. And we were recognizing that, intentional or not, they tend to be run by white people who come from middle class or above. And that who's making the decisions then? You know, who's making the decisions about where money goes and how money flows? You know, and what emerged from our discussions is us, and you know, many people wanted us to join with them on other ideas, but I would defer to Steffen and Kenya, because I'm, as the legislator, I want to model what we're trying to do. I want to give them, you know, as a legislator, I'm given extra power in many situations. So I would defer to them a lot. Like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And what kept coming up was, we want independence. We want empowerment. We want people, we want BIPOC to feel like they're helping each other and lifting each other up, not being saved again, you know, saved yet again by some government intervention that actually doesn't save, but repackages things, and you know, in the new version, it's like the new iPhone or whatever, you know. So that being said, in both of these bills, even though the same group didn't develop, I guess I'm the bridge, but like in both these bills, there's a theme around this, because in the BIPOC land access bill, the government says, we're going to put money in a fund and we're going to create an independent board, which Steffen just explained the details on, that has all these powers and duties to redistribute wealth, to invest money from this fund in people to use in a variety of ways, that we give them a little bit of money to invest in themselves, and that amplifies. And so we're addressing wealth disparity, but furthermore, it's power, because that group is made up all of appointees from organizations that are BIPOC, queer, etc., people who've been marginalized, discriminated against, being given the power to decide how the money is spent. And they have to create rules. They will work with the state to develop rules so they don't break the law. They're going to have procedures, but they are going to figure it out. They're given the power to figure it out, and we're not overly prescribing what they have to do. And in the people's assemblies, what we're saying is that the state is going to create a mechanism for people, if they want, to get more involved and to have more of a say about how the resources flow and where the resources go and how the world around them is shaped. And so in both these bills, something that I see as transformative, and it may not be as bold as some wish because we're working within a colonial legislative system, but they take steps in that direction. And I don't want to change the subject too much, but just another example with the Racial Justice Alliance, we proposed a bill that passed out of the House and is in the Senate now, that addresses health disparities and promotes health equity. And at the center of that bill is a commission that is given the power to tell the Department of Health and state agencies what to do, to give them advice about policy, to weigh in, to review them, to monitor them, to work with healthcare providers to create a new approach to training on cultural competency and anti-racism, to eventually distribute grants and to influence the distribution of COVID money. So in that bill, it's similar. We create a commission. Almost all organizations that are BIPOC, queer, or people with disabilities appointed, give them money and power and say to them, you tell the state what you need, And so that's a change. That is a change in the way that government operates. And I'm hoping that over time, we can create more ways for to cede power, for the government to cede power to the people, and then for the people to take that power and plant those seeds so that they can empower others. And that's, I think, what connects those two bills for me. So Steffen, I don't know if you want to chime in more about.
Yeah, I can chime in. I think, yeah. So I hear you. I can chime in. So I have first and foremost, Brian, I think you explained everything very beautifully. So I don't know if I have that much to add, but I will say that the way that this is how I look at them coming together. The way we look at regenerative economies is sort of complex, but there are certain principles that draws, I think, economies out that we are kind of shooting for in the creation of the land access bill, which I'm just going to call it that to keep it short, because good Lord, these names, y'all. So anyway, so one of it is that wealth is viewed more holistically, right? So we're aiming for that. We're looking for innovative, adaptive, and responsive economies, which I think our board would help to sort of meet and create. We're looking for empowered participation. And empowered participation, I think, is something that our board is going to do, but also that BIPOC communities from all over the state will have access to in a way that doesn't just leave them out to dry, right? There's probably going to be, and I can't say verbatim on any of this, right? Because it's still in the state house, and it has not yet been passed, but also I would add that we don't know what the board's going to do, right? So some of it is kind of up in the air, but we're hoping that, and we're pretty much sure that there's going to be some sort of a wait list created. So it won't just be like, you come in and then it's like one and done. There is empowered participation there. And I also think another thing that's important to mention is that, community in place is really honored in regenerative economies. And we're definitely trying to do that. We're definitely trying to do that within this bill. And I think the Everytowns aspect of the bill, which I'm not the expert on the Everytowns piece, that really was Kenya's piece, Kenya Lazuli's integrative piece, I think really seeks to do that. And so while I'm not super versed in the other bill, because obviously it's not a bill that I've worked on, I can say that just from what I've seen about that bill and what I've heard about that bill, that there are some pretty cool parallels between what we're trying to do. And I'm really hoping, honestly, that we're able to sort of see how these bills, prayerfully, that they're, when they both are passed, I'm going to speak it into existence, right? When they're both passed, right. I'm hoping to see how they complement each other.
Yeah. Power to the people, right? Like this is what it's about, is that shift of power that Brian was talking about, and more inclusive. So in that sense, Stefan, you know, what could it mean for paving the way for other state and federal level legislation? Can you talk about the broader implications of passing this bill? These bills, both of them. We're going to speak it into.
And my audio is cutting out a little bit, so can you repeat that last part? You said,
Sure.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Can you talk about the broader implications on passing these bills? It's meant, you know, or what it could mean for paving the way for other state or federal level legislation.
I think that, well, first and foremost, just generally speaking, well, I'm always going to speak generally, but honestly, there are a lot of states out there like Vermont. You know, we have been a real island amongst ourselves in a way, right? I mean, we don't even really know necessarily what's going on in Massachusetts, what's going on in New Hampshire and Rhode Island, and states that are next to us. But we are not the only state in the US that is predominantly white. We are not the only state in the US that has a huge homogenous population where folks of color are feeling how people in Vermont feel. And I think, one thing I think that Vermont is really good at, and that one thing that I think that we do, and I'm going to give BIPOC folks their cookies here, because I think we're the ones who are really pushing for this in an action-oriented way, is try to create and push for the change that is needed on the lawmaking, but also the grassroots level. And so I think that this bill does that in its own right, because there's that grassroots piece that's connected to that board and all the grassroots organizations, which I get more and more tempted to read off every time I mention it. And then there is also the state side piece of the house, right? So I say all that to say that I'm hoping that it can be a model for other states, especially with similar demographics and geographical makeups as Vermont, like Maine, for example, or, you know, the Wyomings, the Idahos. I could go on, right? To look at what this looks like, but also the states where there have been extreme forms of chattel slavery, right? I mean, because every state was not created equal when it came to that. And so if we can do it in states that, you know, didn't have what I would call as much of a dreadful, even though they've had it, don't let me erase that, right? I'm not trying to erase our histories here, but they haven't had what, say, Mississippi or Georgia has had, right? Because our ancestors, my ancestor, came over and was placed there. And a lot of Black folks in the country feel that, you know, not only with that being said, but there is lots of people from other backgrounds that have come in through the South, right? I'm hoping that we can make a model and set a model that can be replicated there in their own ways, in their own, in a nuanced way. And, you know, this might be a little bit of a pipe dream, but I would love for it to be used as a national model. So if anybody is out there looking at this right now, like, look us up. We're very friendly and we would love to talk about it.
Can I add to that?
Sure, Brian, of course.
So, you know, Stefan's point about, you know, Vermont could be a role model, it's real. And I can give you an example that I experienced, that when I got elected in 2017, one of the bills I introduced wanted to create an artificial intelligence commission. And at first people kind of laughed at the idea. And then little by little, I kept advocating for it and, you know, educating people and talking about it. And it became, it was more present in the media. One thing led to another, and the bill passed. And Vermont became the first state in US history to pass a bill like this, that created a group to explore the benefits and risks of artificial intelligence. And after we passed that bill, so I have to check in my book, I have to check in my book here, that, so this book came out of that, okay? So this is what I'm saying. Like, so Vermont passed this law. Now, as of 2020, 19 states have a similar law being considered. And Alabama created an AI task force. And New York City created an automated decision-making systems task force. And because of what Vermont did, we got global attention, and I was invited to participate in this transatlantic fellowship, and we just published this book that's distributed around the world of people from Europe, from Parliament, from the Bundestag in Germany, and state reps. And I mean, like, here's what one of my articles is. Like, look at this. Like, this is Vermont. Look at this images. Okay. The article is called "You Can Get There From Here," because you know the saying is you can't get there from here. Well, you can get there from here. Travel advice for policymakers on the roads of artificial intelligence. But my point is that that one bill that Vermont passed led to action around the country. It led me to connect with people internationally. And now I've come back from the fellowship to Vermont this year, and Vermont's looking at taking action on more AI legislation and potentially leading the way for the country and even the world in our approach to making sure that we minimize the risks of artificial intelligence and maximize the benefits, because it's inevitable. We are not stopping AI at this point. So I put that out there. I know it's a little change of topic, although we can get into the power theme there if you want, because it's there too. But the point is that a little state like Vermont can have a huge impact. And I don't think that was a big deal to pass one bill and create a task force. And the ripples it had were massive. If Vermont passed a land access bill like this, it could be a model for the country about how can different states look at creating mechanisms, structures of government that give more power to people and redistribute resources in ways that just can't be done through the normal channels. So I think that, Steffen, you're absolutely right that Vermont has been an example in different areas. I gave you one. There's others that other people could give. There's also bad examples. Today, the House of Representatives voted on a resolution to apologize for eugenics. Right. Vermont was a leader in eugenics. Mm-hmm. So, if we can lead in eugenics, we can lead in justice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Brian. Thank you. Let's snap for Brian on that. Yeah. Brian, that the regenerative economy bill proposes 20-year roadmap, and it aims to achieve 90% regenerative economy by 2043. For you, what for you does Vermont look like in a future where both of these pieces of legislation have passed? What does that look like?
I love this question because I am like, for those who know me, they know I'm a performance artist. I studied music, and I'm like a creative person, and like a big part of what motivates me is imagining what it would be like. And like what I picture Vermont in 20 years is even the nature being even more well preserved, like even cleaner and nicer, but there won't be any more abandoned downtowns. There won't be any more, we wouldn't see poverty. What we would see is people living in high quality. It could be humble. My house isn't fancy, it could be humble housing. But we can make people live nice. Like we can invest in people so that they're living like a high quality life. Those social determinants of health are massive. People living in clean, warm homes where they feel good because they know that that home is not toxic, it's not hurting things, the energy they're using is coming from a good place. I imagine an economy where if people want to work, there's a job for them, but people don't have to work anymore because we've used AI in the best possible way so that you can make a living working 15 hours a week, and you can spend the rest of the week playing music, having fun, dancing, gardening, going for walks, skiing and golfing, or whatever it is that other people do that I don't do, the things that you enjoy, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy. I imagine that in every town that there are BIPOC, in every town with access to land. I imagine a Vermont where the Abenaki people are lifted up and given far more power than we give now. In fact, I would even go so far as to say there should be a parallel government and we work in partnership equally between the Abenaki people and the state. That if you asked me, others may disagree. To me, in 20 years, what this would look like would be a whole new way of distributing power. And the thing is that the legislature would still have its role, but in every region of the state, you would have people's assemblies, and you would have sub meetings of, you could have like town meetings more than once a year in towns, more opportunities where technology allows people to connect, not disconnect. But I would, I keep going on, but the Vermont, I imagine, is a place where, we really would cultivate harmony and balance with nature, and we would have come a long way in our relationships to each other, working, we would have gone through, in 20 years, hopefully we will have gone through truth and reconciliation, so that people can't deny what happened anymore. We just accept it, but we've moved on without forgetting it, where we moved on in a way that we're like, what, we did the right things we did what we had to make it right. And people could live here knowing that, and that when people came here, which they will, because they're going to be fleeing all the flooding coasts and, devastation, that we would have built a haven for people, to come from all around the world who want to live in a place like that. That's what I would imagine it being. And yeah, and I also think we should bring the Olympics to Vermont. I know this is like going off topic a little, because I think if we brought the Olympics to Vermont, we could like invest in all this housing and transportation infrastructure for the Olympics, and then have it lined up so a bunch of people move to Vermont, and people who are homeless are like given housing, and like basically we just fill all that housing, and people could like take the train from Stowe to Burlington in like a half hour, or take the train like. But anyway, that might be part of this, because it would be cool if the state was super interconnected, and we had like, ways of getting around and staying connected, that don't destroy the earth. But I feel like I'm rambling, so I'll stop there and just maybe see what Steffen has to say about this topic.
Well, I just have to say, those are beautiful dreams. I love them all, and I can envision that with you. I would love to hear Steffen's vision for 20 years from now in Vermont.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I love to ramble, but I will not. I will digress from that. I would say that, Brian said a lot of what I think I was going to say. I did want to point out, though, that I think the way to get there is through queer BIPOC leadership. I think that that is something that should be highlighted, and that we should be saying loudly and proudly. Because queer BIPOC people, I think, really understand what it is like to live a holistic experience, the holistic experience of oppression, right? And that is for people who are, androgynous, femme-bodied, male-bodied, non-binary, the whole gambit. So that's one thing that I would say. For me, kind of piggybacking off of what Brian said, a lot of folks of color are living in areas where the air quality is not up to standard, where the things like simple things like piping lead to cancers and water pollution coming right out of their faucets, and just a whole bunch of things like that, right? Mental health is something that is of concern to me as a clinician, and that I also look at statistically, right? And all of these things are things that Vermont seems to be excelling at beating back, right? And I think that we have to recognize that a lot of that has been because of while it looks small numerically, the diversity that has come to the state, and the diversity that has remained in the state to make positive change. I would say that, to Brian's point, folks will be coming up here, and folks are already starting to come up here. And so for me, when you ask me that question, I look at it and I say, it looks like legacy. It looks like a place where if I wanted to get a couple of acres, I would be able to say to my descendants, prayerfully I have descendants, here is something that I stewarded, that is clean, that is healthy, that's going to help your wellness, that you can go out in and lay out in the sun and feel perfectly safe, and safe from police persecution. And as a queer person, know that your neighbors are going to help you and understand you if you deal with certain types of discrimination, or anti-Blackness, or anti-queerness, or all of those things, right? So that's kind of what I envision when you ask me that question, and what I think that this bill has the potential to really do. And it's ironic that in what they would call one of the whitest states, which I always push back on that because I live on the Massachusetts and New Hampshire borders, and let me tell you, when I go outside, there are folks of color all over the place. I was just out today and I saw folks of color all throughout those stores, out and about. That we are leading and we are pushing in a lot of those efforts. And I hope to see the same things and the same access being created, not only for descendants of slaves, but for the new American population, like Brian said, the Abenaki population, and all the other populations that I could list out, here in Vermont. I know that it has been a predominantly white state, but what we're doing and what we're trying to lead is action. And what I think a lot of our white colleagues are doing all across the country and failing to understand is that we can talk something to death, but we've had many, 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 many years to intellectualize these issues, and now we want to leave something behind. We want to have legacies. We want to have economic gains and growth, and it's about time we started talking about money as folks of color and what that means in this society and what that means for us if we don't have access to anything.
Thank you. I love the word legacy, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to leave a legacy, a planet, an environment, a place for the future generations to live better than we did before and leave them with our legacy. I love that. Thank you.
Our grandparents did it for us.
Yes, right. They sure did. Well, so before we close off tonight, I just want to give each of you an opportunity to tell everyone who's listening tonight where they can learn more about your work and how to follow you and all that good stuff. Go ahead and promote yourself, guys.
Brian, you go first.
Go for it.
Oh, Lord.
If you insist, I will go first. If you insist, I will go first. So,
oh my God, I can't handle this.
You, if you want to follow me, you look for the big hat. Seriously.
Brian.
Let's see. What do we got here? Nothing. What is this? I heard you talk about money, Steffen. All right. So seriously though, we were joking about me using my props before the show was over. So I thought that was my cue that I had to like have a dramatic entertainment moment to end things. So I'll pull it together. So to follow me, so I have to be honest that like, I'm not big on social media. Like I'll like look at it and like in moments like every other cyber addicted human, but I don't post and stuff a lot. Like I really hate Twitter. It's so toxic. So if you want to follow my work, honestly, you could follow my Facebook state representative page, but I guess I'm not good at social media. I'm being honest with you. So the best way to follow my work would probably be to I don't have a website. I don't have a mailing list. All these things Rights and Democracy wants us to do, I don't do. And I have to be honest with you all. I spend like all of my time working on ideas and like actually talking with people and connecting with people and organizing and planning. And so I don't put energy into the social media. It's a weakness. So if you want to follow me though, you could look up my Facebook page, state rep page. You could look me up on Twitter. I do have an Instagram for my state rep page. I post random things every now and then, but if you really want to follow my work, maybe the best
What
thing.
about an email address?
Yeah, you could always send me an email, bcina@ledge.state.vt.us. We do get like 500 emails a day right now. So I'm like behind on emails. So if someone's waiting, I'm sorry, I triage. It's like if it's an emergency or I respond and then like, there's things like, so it's been rough. This question has forced me to recognize that I could probably do better at social media, or at the very least, accept the help of an intern someday, because if you honestly, the best way to follow my work is to wait till it makes it into the news, because that, you know, it happens. But I'm not good about sharing it. I'm sorry. I will tell you this. I got something for you. Seeding Power Vermont, the coalition that Steffen and I are part of with Kenya and Beverly Little Thunder and others, we do have a mailing list. And Seeding Power is sending out regular updates on the BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Bill. And we're going to be expanding our efforts. Like, I don't want to set people up for, you know, to get too excited, but we're going to be looking at other ways to take the philosophy of seeding power into other issues and developing other policy and other bills and other initiatives and partnerships. So if you want to sign up for Seeding Power Vermont, I'll look up the info and we'll put it up at the end of the show, and you can get on that mailing list at least. That's the closest thing I have to a mailing list right now. I'm sorry.
You got there, Ryan. You got there. We
All right.
got some progress there.
All
That's a great idea. Thank you. Steffen,
Well-
it's your turn to give your plug.
Okay, well, not to be outdone, I went and got you. And it's not real.
Put it back on. Put it back on.
Okay, don't throw nothing at me. No red paint, because I will go all little Kim on you.
Oh, I got my fur too, girl. Don't worry. I got my fur too, girl.
And by the way, I will say that is not real. So if you throw anything near me, just know that like bad words will come your way. So anyway, what should I put? So first and foremost, you can follow my work at the NAACP or Windham County NAACP. We do have a website, and you can just Google Windham County Vermont NAACP or Windham NAACP, and that'll pop right on up, and that'll have all of us there. I'm also affiliated with the Bright Leadership Institute, which is a new institute that is hoping to bring folks of color into leadership opportunities and build networks and cohorts. So you can find me there. You can just type in Bright Leadership Institute Vermont or BLI Vermont. And also I have some of the socials. I agree with Brian, like Twitter is the devil, and I don't really fool with Twitter. But I will say that our NAACP pages does have a Twitter for Vermont NAACP. And of course I have an Insta because I love to take pictures of things. And then I also have a Facebook that I post on and I sort of check, but I just really get on there and post and then jump off. But if you inbox me, it might be a couple of days later, but I will make sure to get back to you. So yeah, I'm here. Hit me up. I feel like I'm pretty friendly. I love to talk to people. It's the extrovert in me. I haven't been out of the house in a year, so I'm amped to talk. You know? And at this point in time, if you go on to the website, the NAACP website, we have a number, so you can call us direct too. And if you leave a voicemail, we'll get back to you. But and sometimes we're able to answer just straight out. So I hope that met your, Mia, you set a high bar there with that question, and I don't know how to answer it. So I hope that I answered it right.
Brilliantly.
You can also you can also look in the news as well, because I think that we've got a couple things going on. So
we do. We got some stuff going on, including BIPOC vaccine clinics this weekend. And actually, Brattleboro just had theirs today, right?
Yes. So we've had a couple clinics at this point. A shout out to Wichi R2, who is the vice president of the Windham County branch, who has really been spearheading it down here in Windham. Really, we are knocking it out of the park. I think both times we had our BIPOC centered clinics, we filled up within a matter of like a couple hours and had a wait list. So it's one of those things where we know people here. There's a lot of diversity in Windham County, like I said. I don't know where the census is at. That's a whole other discussion. But when you go outside, you can see it. And a lot of folks are going and signing up, and we're ecstatic about it. So yes, shout out for the BIPOC clinics. I think we've vaccinated well over 100 people at this point.
Yeah, I thought of another way that people could follow me.
Okay.
Gotcha. Really interesting. Because I was like I'm thinking like this was a good lesson in like realizing that there's a piece that I might be missing, but the reason I don't worry about it is because it happens in other ways. Like the Progressive Party is Vermont's third party, and I am primarily working with the Progressive Caucus in the House. And the Progressive Caucus sends out a weekly update. So I'm going to post on Facebook in the comments the website. And if you sign up for the Progressive update, once a week, you will get an update on all the work of the Progressive Caucus. So that's not just me, it's me and the 6 other progressives who are from Burlington, Winooski, Barnard, Essex, Brattleboro. So a lot of the things that we are working on will be reported on each week, like usually pressing issues like this last week, it was the pensions. But I wrote the update. So I also talked about the health equity bill and about artificial intelligence. And so that's a way to keep up with some of the work that I'm doing and that my colleagues are doing in the Progressive Caucus. So I'm going to post that. So I gave you 2 things, Seating Power Vermont and the Progressive Party.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And we will be putting in the Facebook comment sections both H273, which is VT BIPOC, the Vermont BIPOC-led and Land Access and Opportunity Act. We'll put the text and the link to that, and H292, which is the Vermont Regenerative Economy Bill. So we will put that in the Facebook chat too. Thank you guys. Well, once again, we want to thank you for our incredible guests. We had so much fun tonight. This was powerful and a hopeful discussion. And of course, thank everybody out in the Facebook land for joining us. And we don't want to leave it at that. We want to invite you to get more involved with the work and be part of this process. We want to build widespread support for these bills because they are, basically, world changing, life changing. So spread the word, and to find out more about our Thrive Agenda, about the Thrive Agenda, we will put that also in the link. It's www.thriveagenda.com. Very important part of this piece too. And just stay in touch with us at Rights and Democracy Institute on Facebook, Twitter, and our newly minted Instagram account. Thanks all. Have a good night.